Hey, welcome back to another episode of The Selfish Woman. I am here with Karen Schaible, and Karen is a retired nurse, and she struggled for over 30 years with food and weight, trying diet after diet. She was depressed, stressed, overwhelmed, and anxious to the point of having panic attacks. She was great at looking after everyone else, but full of shame when it came to putting herself first. At the age of 42, she was burnt out, physically and mentally unwell, and had thoughts of ending her life. This started her on the path of healing and growth, and she learned how to take back her control in her life. And that was when she finally had the confidence and self worth to leave an unhealthy marriage of 22 years, be less stressed and busy, and lose 100 pounds. Her passion is helping others find the same freedom in their lives. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you.
So happy you're here. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you and also be there for, other women, like showing them that no matter what they're going through, they can do it. They can get through it.
Yeah, we all need to hear that. That's why telling our stories is so important because it helps others to feel like they're not alone. So let's get into it. I mean, there's a lot to unpack in your story, even just from your bio. I'm like, okay, there's a lot of behind the scenes going on here. So let's dive right into, sort of, I think it sounds like a rock bottom, but you tell me of like depressed, stressed, overwhelmed, anxious, like, let's start there. Like, how did you get to that point? How did you find yourself in that place?
It was it started at age 8, actually, and it just built. Like, you don't even see it really coming per se. But at age 8, we take on what our parents do to us or say. And so my dad, he was an old school Ukrainian farmer. And the way you disciplined was, the strap. And I was somebody that, he was hard on my mom. So I spoke up, and that was talking back, and you got the strap. So
Mm.
I now see, as I did my journey, I saw that I took on, that was his way of dealing with things, but I took it on as I'm not good enough. There's something wrong with me. And so that took, like, we don't even realize it as kids. That's what we do. And so that was with me for so long. And that's what kept doing the seeding underneath the no confidence and no self-esteem. And my mom, she felt bad, and her way of showing love was food, right? And so I learned, when you're not feeling good, here, food is love. And so I turned to food. Food was my friend, and everything I did, food was food was there for me, right? A lot of other
Yeah.
things in my life weren't, but food sure was. And it just, like, that underneath, not good enough, not enough, just stayed with me for like at 42. And I got in a marriage. I thought, at 20 nobody would marry me. I had lost some weight at that time, and like, nobody's ever going to want me. This guy came along 6 months, 8 months, I think, after we met. He's proposing. Like, it's like, I didn't think anybody would want me, so got in this unhealthy marriage. And so and he ended up, like, it was mentally abusive. And so
Mm.
with myself being so low about myself, and then having somebody on there adding to it, it just kept building and building. And I go to work, and I just never felt like I did a good enough job. I'd come home, and it just sat there. And then at 42, I was physically not well. I had a blood infection, and I was mentally at that point where I had thoughts of, I want to end this. I can't do this anymore. It was so, like, I was at that point there that I couldn't even get out of bed. Like, it took all the energy I could just to get to work. And then I couldn't even look after my kids. And that's why it was like, I can't do this anymore. And I'm actually glad I hit that rock bottom, because that jolted me into going, Karen, like, you got to look after yourself. Because I had kids for a reason. I wanted kids. I love kids. And in that moment, I thought, I can't do anything. That would hurt them too much. And that was when I went on a quest to find something different in my
Mm.
life. And that's
Yeah.
on a group coaching program that changed my life.
Right.
Changed
And
it.
it's true. So many of us need that rock bottom experience to shake us awake because we get so autopilot and stuck in our ways. We can't see anything different. And then something happens to kind of jolt us out of it and be like, something's got to change. I know that happened for me a few times in my life, and it did. And I started taking the initiative to change. So I think that's really common. And sometimes we do need that. And also, like, there's so much in what you're saying that is, I think, so many women can relate to, as far as not feeling like you're enough, not feeling good enough. And the way we were parented creates that, whether it's intentional or not from the parents, it creates that message that there's something wrong with me. And then, it sounds like with your journey that culminated in you becoming a people pleaser and abandoning yourself to, other people, helping other people. And like you said, getting married young. So like, I think that's so good to note, is like, look at your past, look at how you were parented, look at the messaging, because that, if it's not dealt with, becomes our behaviors in our adulthood. And it sounds like that was really impactful for you.
Yeah, it was. And it's interesting because I didn't figure that out until 42 when I went to this program, and it taught all about what's going on inside us, like in our head. And I wish I would have known that earlier, because I really did feel like I was the only one. I didn't tell anybody what was going on inside myself, like nobody, because as a nurse, you're supposed to be strong and in control. And I worked psychiatry even at that time, right? And I'm like, I can't be weak. And it's like, oh, I wish I had somebody showing me, like, you're not weak. It's weak when you don't look after yourself. Like, that's what I had to realize. I need to be, the weakness comes from like me just not wanting to deal with it. And in that moment, when I hit rock bottom, I realized I have to deal with things.
Mm-hmm.
Like pushing it down and suppressing it. That's what caused me, a huge part of why it caused me to hit that rock bottom. I mean, that's what I teach my clients is, you have to allow yourself. Like, I never allowed myself to even feel sad, or, when I did feel sad, I beat myself up for feeling sad.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
have to learn it's okay. Like, it's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel that way. I mean, that was the other way I grew up was, and I think I talked a lot, like a lot of people, they're grown up that, if you hurt yourself, don't worry, don't cry. It's okay.
Oh my
So,
God. Yes.
yeah. So
Don't cry. It's okay. Don't cry.
we're learned not to allow ourselves to feel. And that was a big one for me. That was an eye opener. And
For
that was a
sure.
huge part of why I gained 100 pounds over my years, was because I felt things I didn't like to feel it. And so I turned to food to numb it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know, so I can relate to that. I know so many women can relate to that, but also, like you said, being modeled, it's, don't cry. It's okay. You're okay. You're okay. Because as parents, we don't want to see our kid hurt, but we're not validating their emotional experience. And so we don't learn how to process emotions. And like you said, after years and years and years of stuffing, avoiding, denying, we end up in these places where it's no longer sustainable. Our bodies start breaking down, things start crumbling to pieces. And that's when we have that opportunity to be like, okay, let's deal with it. So I want everyone listening to hear that validation of their own experience. And I love that you work with nurses, and that, you're a retired nurse, because nurses are such a special type of people, right? Their whole career is built around nurturing, caring, being there for others. And yet I hear this over and over. So many nurses are neglecting themselves and not caring for themselves. And I was married to a nurse, and I saw it with him the same way, as like, other focused, which is a beautiful gift. But when you're not taking care of yourself, it's not really sustainable. So that also sounds like it contributed to where you ended up with, as far as being a nurse. Would you say that's true?
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, I was great at helping and doing and being there for everybody else. Everybody else. And I mean, that's the profession too. You go there and you give and you help. And then I did that with my kids and my husband and my parents. And then I had nothing left for myself. And that it took, when you hear, this was one that I never quite understood, like put your oxygen mask on first. And I
Mhm.
heard it and I heard it, but it never registered with me. Like I thought of, like I understood it intellectually, but I could never put it in place in my life.
Mm.
And when I did, that's when everything shifted. And it's funny because I always felt that it's selfish to be looking after yourself, doing things for yourself. You're supposed to do it for everybody else.
Yep.
And then it's like, no, because I couldn't even be there for my kids at that time. That's selfish. Like,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
selfish not to look after yourself.
So I love that. And honestly, I've had several guests use this analogy and we've all heard it, put your oxygen mask on first. But I like how you describe it, that you understood it intellectually, but you didn't know how to apply it to your life. So what does it mean then? How do we move out of the intellectual, like, yeah, I know I'm supposed to like take care of myself, blah, blah, blah. How do we move out of the, like, I know it, but I don't do it, into actually embracing it as like a way of life, a way of sustaining and taking care of ourselves so we can take care of others better? Like, how did that happen for you?
How it happened is I realized it all starts with what I'm thinking and what I'm saying to myself. Like
Mm.
that's the bottom line. If you are telling yourself you're not worth it, you're not good enough, you're not going to do things for yourself, right? And so that was a big part of it. I had to learn that I am worth it, that I am something. Like I that's a part of why we don't look after ourselves, is because we don't think very highly of ourselves. When I started implementing, taught like journaling, I journal still every day, writing things down in my head, the things that aren't helping me. And like, do I really want to keep thinking that? Like, no, I don't want that. This is the way I want to think instead. When I started talking to myself better, then I was able to look after myself.
Mm-hmm. And you're so right. Like that awareness of, number one, I don't feel like I'm good enough. I don't believe I'm good enough. Let's use the belief. And then number two, starting to really become aware of how we talk to ourselves. And if we are not believing we're good enough and we don't talk to ourselves in a way that affirms that we're good enough, then why would we consider ourselves good enough to take care of? So I love how you break that down. And again, like I feel like women are going to be listening to this going like, yep, yep, yep. Like we all, I think, have that element of not enough, and not just parenting, but the patriarchy, society, advertising, media. There's always a way we're not enough. So we have to buy something or be somebody else. So we all, I think, as women have that to a certain extent, or have had to work that through. So I love that you're talking about that mindset piece, and really just being honest with ourselves about what we believe about ourselves. And as you said, right, we find coping mechanisms to avoid the truth, the
Mhm.
food, whatever it might be, to avoid the truth of really, we don't like ourselves that much.
Yeah, it is. It really is. Like my self-talk was absolutely terrible. Like no wonder I was depressed and I was anxious, because I mean, when you keep like all the calls I've had with nurses when we get on and talk, it is absolutely common with every single one, the way they talk to themselves, and it's not very nice. You come home from work and you're like, well, you should have done this, and why didn't you do that? And then you feel like terrible. And no wonder when you feel terrible, what do? I mean, I went from food when I was first losing weight and I wasn't really into this yet. I went from food to alcohol.
Mhm.
So, because it was just, I didn't know how to deal with what I was saying to myself. And like, that's the biggest part, is really, I tell my clients, would you talk to your best friend that way? Would you talk to a child that way? If you're not going to, then you don't do it to yourself either. And
Yeah.
we're so used to it. I think it's interesting because now I see it. I did it because I thought that would make me change. If I beat myself up and
Mhm.
talk negative about myself, and that's going to change things. But it actually totally does the opposite. When you're not feeling very good about yourself, what do? You turn to other things to make yourself feel better.
Totally. Okay, so I have a vulnerable question for you because uh, for me as well with my clients, this is one of the big things we have to start with first, right? Self-talk. But I find that it takes a lot of time and work for women to start to actually hear that self-talk because it's so subconscious that it's just who I am, right? I don't really pay attention to it. I know that I kind of beat myself up, but what does that mean? Can you share like some actual things you would say to yourself? Because I feel like that might help women to clue into like, oh, that. Yeah. Like, what are some examples of things you used to say to yourself that really kept you stuck?
First was, well, a big one. I hate my body, right? Because I
Mm,
hated the way I looked, like absolutely hated it. And that really created a lot of depression for me. And so I just like start with, you know what? I just have a body. It's where it's at right now. Like just reminding, like, it's okay wherever you're at, like go there. And then the other one was like, I went in nursing. I changed positions a lot because I didn't think I was good enough at those jobs. And I thought, oh, I'd be better at others. And I learned that, you know what? You are like, you're doing your best. Like, you're absolutely doing your best. Like, we're so good at, we need to have, be a perfectionist and have it perfect. And I'm like, no, like, you are doing your best. Wherever you're at, it's okay. This is where you're needing to be right now. Just one step forward in this moment, just one baby step. Like, those are the type of things. And you know, you are worth it. Like, I didn't believe that for a long time. And I had to then write that out and show the things, like write out the things that I was good at, I was worth it for. Like, we have to see evidence. Our brain needs
yep.
that evidence. And so I would write the reasons why I am good enough. I had to remind our brains are so good at looking at the negative. We have to show it a whole other direction.
Mhm.
If we don't, it's just going to keep going back to that. So it
That's right.
was just practicing, like, patience, and practicing every day, writing things out, why I'm good enough, that, you know, you are doing the best you can. Yeah, maybe there's a place where you can get better at. What can you do to get better at it? Instead of just beating ourselves up, it's like solution. Okay, take a look at it at a different perspective here.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're talking about like hating your body, and I used to feel that way too. I think one way for women to really wake up to how they're talking to themselves is looking in the mirror in the morning. What do you go to? I hate my thighs, I hate my stomach, I hate my cellulite, whatever. And really starting to, if you had to write that down and be really real about what you just said to yourself, it would then sound so mean, right? But we're just not even aware that we're doing it. So I think that's a great point. And then I love what you said about like just writing the truth to yourself, because that can be really uncomfortable at first, is starting to praise ourselves. And especially if we've been raised with a childhood where we were punished for doing wrong things and maybe not praised, or not praised as much for doing the right things, then we start to think that, well, that's how I'm going to get results. Just going to like point out all my flaws. Or, one thing I used to do all the time is I would have a conversation with somebody, or I would know that I needed to have a conversation with somebody, and I would go through my head of like all my things I would say, and then I'd imagine the responses, and I would have this whole conversation with this person in my head, and it was always negative. It was always like, oh, they're going to be offended, or they're not going to like what I said, or they're not going to like me. So our minds just create all of these stories and dialogue based on our experiences, our childhood, and what we were told and taught and messaged. So that in itself is so powerful.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. It's yeah, paying attention to what we're saying to ourselves. Like, that's the absolutely first thing I work with my clients on is, if you're not paying attention, and like you had said, like a lot of these things that we're saying to ourselves, they are on automatic pilot in our brain, in the back of that brain, and we don't even pay attention to them. Like, we're not even aware they're there. We just say them. And like you said, it's like, well, that's just the way I am. Like, so many of my clients, well, that's just who I am.
Mhm.
No, that's not who you are. That's just what you're saying inside your head. And we
Yeah.
get to choose whatever we want to think about ourselves. And you know, this having conversations with other people, and the stories that we get going in our head, It really, that's what I used to do so much. And then it would cycle. Actually, I was just talking to a friend yesterday about this, and it sits in your mind and it goes over and over and over. And I said, no, like just stop, write it all out, get it out of your head on paper, because when you see it on paper, then you're like, this is silly. Like you can just,
Right.
okay, really now? Like, is this really true? Is this really going to happen? Like that gives us a lot more clarity on what we can do that will make us feel a whole lot better.
Absolutely. So true. And that is the first step. So I want to go to, where you decided to end your marriage. Again, I feel like I've been there. I know a lot of our readers have either been there or they're struggling in their marriage. So how did you get the confidence to end the marriage? See, because you said it was unhealthy. So like, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, there was a lot of I know gaslighting. I don't know if a lot of your, readers here, but just things that he'd say and do that had me believing there was something wrong with me and it's my fault. And so I just had that. It was a 22-year marriage, and it was 2 years of us going to marriage counseling. Like we had been working on it. I was the one taking to us getting to marriage counseling, and the counselor actually even said that last one, going, there's nothing I can do. He doesn't see that there's anything he has a part of this.
Mm,
So in that moment, I was just like, I'm going to let it go. And that's when I ended up just shortly after that, about 4 months after, when my body just yelled out at me. Like that's when I hit my rock bottom. But my body was yelling out at me. Like it was a chronic stress in my life, that marriage and how I talked to myself. And my body yelled out at me, like, pay attention. And that's when I went to the program, that group program, and it taught me how to see the worth in myself. So it was
mhm.
really about getting the confidence back. Like one of the guys, it was a 3-part program, and this one guy I became really good friends with. In the first, it was a weekend thing. And the second weekend, he goes, I didn't even know you were there the first one, because I used to be a wallflower. Like I hid in the backgrounds because I was so afraid of what other people thought of me. So I
Mhm.
just tried to hide. I was bullied growing up. But I just kept working on myself, and the belief, you talk about the belief in myself that I am worth it. Like I am worth it. And once I felt that, then I gave an ultimatum. I actually went away with a girlfriend to Mexico for a week.
Yeah.
And I said, if you really want this marriage, when I return back, I've got to see something a little different, because I have done all I can. And I came back, it was like I've never been gone. And in that moment, I realized I have that, I can do it on my own, because I was so afraid to be on my own. I was so afraid to be on my own. That was a big part of why I never left before. And also too, I grew up, well, you're not supposed to get divorced. So I had this in my mind, like running. And then I realized, like, no, I am worth having a life that I enjoy and love, and living like this it's just going to drag me down again.
Yeah.
So yeah, in
Yeah.
that moment I decided I'm done. And it was it felt so, like, the relief I felt was amazing. It was
Yeah.
hard, don't get me, like I had 3 little children, but I knew inside myself this was the best decision for me.
Right. And everything you're saying is so in line with what I'm always talking about being a selfish woman, is that you started putting yourself first. You started saying, wait a minute, like I'm doing all that I need to do. I'm working on myself, and I'm growing in my ability to see what I want and need. And then you found that confidence to stand in your power and say, like, no, like I deserve this. I want this. And then allowing the other person to make their choice. Right. But I mean, that's exactly it. And I think there's so many women who are sitting in that place of like, I've got young children, I'm not happy, I feel like I'm doing all that I can, but I'm so scared to leave, so afraid to pull the trigger and move into like an unknown. And so I think that in itself is such a huge obstacle for so many women to feel like they can make that choice, that they will be okay. What would you say to those women who are listening?
What I would say is, it's really looking at, like, being honest with yourself. Like you've talked a lot about, it's about being honest. And really writing it all down, because like I say, when it's in your head, you can't see really clearly. So writing it all down, like looking at, if I stay here, where am I going to be? Like, is this the best thing for me? Because we do it, I was doing it for my children. I'm staying in this marriage because of my children, but yet I was so unhappy. That then reflected back on my children.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I knew that if I wanted my children to have the best life they can have and have the best mother they can have, I needed to do what's right for me.
Mhm.
And it's scary, but it's just writing it all out, writing out like, hey, if I stay here, this is where it's going to be. If I go here, this is the way it's going to be. And then you can make a choice from there.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. I love asking people, if nothing changed from today to the end of your life in your relationship, would you be okay with that? Because it's really hard to be in love with potential. It's really hard to be in love with what could be, and hanging in, hoping for change, waiting for change. But there comes a point where it's like, if you start changing yourself, you're going to start building confidence, self-esteem, getting your power back. That will start to change everything, regardless of the outcome. Start changing yourself first. And that sounds like what you did. And you mentioned going to a weekend program. Like, was that a part of it? Getting support, getting help, getting, people who could kind of pour into you?
Oh, that's where my whole life changed. It was, I had somebody showing me the brain that was going on, because I couldn't see that. Like, I had no idea this is what was happening.
Yeah.
And then the support, it was like such an amazing group. They had us doing things that I never would have done on my own. Like, I would have never done. They had us facing our fears a lot too. I used to be so afraid of heights, like so afraid. And they had us rappelling down. And I cried. I remember crying the whole way down. And then it got to the bottom, like, that wasn't that bad. And that was the place where I think so much changed, because I'm like, excuse, why am I so afraid? Like, stop it. Like, this fear is what's been holding me back. But the fear is just what I'm imagining in my mind.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I probably got off track, but it was just really that group program showed me what's going on in my mind that I didn't know what was there, and then how to change it all. And the group, like that support and the encouragement, it made a world of difference.
Mhm.
I've done lots of things on my own. Like, I actually went to psychiatrists, psychologists, like I've done them all. And that never made a difference. Like, it really never did. And when I did this program, it's exactly what I do with my nurses now. I do exactly what I learned there plus more, but that's what changed it. Like,
Mm.
doing it on your own is one thing. Some people can. I'm not one of those. I need I
Me
need
neither.
I need support.
Change is really hard on your own, and you can have it. You can get intellectual knowledge, but that real world, getting out of your comfort zone. I mean, it is so friggin' hard when you're doing it on your own. But if you have someone walking alongside you and helping you and guiding you, then you're starting to take, like you said, like, would you have ever gone and just like, let's rappel off of whatever by myself, right? But you find yourself doing things, and you're like, oh my God, like, I'm so much more capable than I thought I was.
Oh, huge. Like, we did rock climbing. We actually had to go out and just approach people on the street and just talk to them and then offer them some money. I'm like, I would have never done that. Like, they had to do things that took us out of our comfort zone. And
Mhm.
I think that's what changed a lot. From what helped me change is because I was so good at staying in my comfort zone. Like,
Yeah.
that's, even though it was uncomfortable being in that comfort zone, it was more comfortable. So I had somebody pushing me out of it. And then once you start doing that, and you realize I am capable, like I can do
Mhm.
this, then
Mhm.
you just keep doing more and more. And it's interesting, because I always thought, like, I grew up, okay, you just get your job, you work it, you just do the same old every day, you enjoy. But now I've realized, like, I love learning and exploring and doing different things. Like, that's what keeps me going and motivated. And that's what I'm finding my nurses find too, is stop staying so stuck in your comfort zone and get out. And it changes everything. Like my relationships changed with my children.
Right.
When I looked after myself and got out of my comfort zone and did all this and loved myself, I could love my
Mhm.
kids in a whole other way that was so much better.
Yes, you started putting yourself first, and then we become better parents because we're modeling what a strong, independent, powerful woman is. We're becoming leaders. Oh my God, that's so good. So inspiring. Okay, so I just want to touch on the weight loss because 100 pounds. Okay, that's a pretty amazing accomplishment that not many people can find success at. So, how did this all aid you in getting healthy?
Well, it was 13 years ago, and how getting healthy. I had done many things. Like I did all the diets for 30 years. And what really, I had this seed in my head. My son, who, when he was, I think, a 10 or 11, he had some challenges with his behavior. And the doctors were wanting him to go on medication, and I was like, no, that's not happening. I just didn't want that at that age.
Right.
So I took him to a naturopath, and we put him on a whole new, like, a healthy eating plan. Totally changed his behavior. So at that point I knew food does a lot for our body, eating healthy. So I tried that on my own. It just didn't work because I felt terrible about myself. If I'm feeling terrible about myself, I can't
Right.
stick with it. So when I hit that 42 and my body was giving out at that time, I knew if I didn't change the way I was eating, stop like turning to those crappy foods all the time, I'm going to end up, who knows what, diabetes, not be able to do anything with my kids. And that's the place then. I didn't go on a diet. What I did was I just kept working on my brain.
Mm.
That then stopped me from going off track. My clients always say off track, but stop that emotional eating, because I was a huge emotional eater and a huge binge eater. And that's how I lost the weight. It wasn't a diet. I mean, I lost weight by eating ice cream every night.
Mhm,
I just
mhm.
learned how to slowly eat less and less and less. And that's how I lost it. But I lost it by doing the mental diet. I didn't do all the regular diets that are out there.
A
And
mental diet. I love it because I totally agree. I think that weight is not a physical problem. It's an emotional and a mental issue that, and when we deal with how we're talking to ourselves and our relationship with ourselves and we heal those buried emotions, then we become more light in our emotions, become more light in our thoughts, and the body starts to manifest that and starts to respond. So I mean that's something that I totally believe as well. And for my own weight loss, that was the same thing. It was like once I got happy and started loving myself, like then the weight loss was sort of the byproduct of that.
absolutely, that was mine. I left a marriage, I worked on myself, and the weight was a side effect of working on myself and feeling better about myself. Like, honestly, when I felt so unhappy and depressed and anxious, it's heavy inside. Like,
Yes.
the body, you're so heavy
Yeah.
feeling. And when you're feeling that, you don't make good, healthy choices.
No.
You just want to feel better. And we've learned, okay, food helps us feel better, but there's a whole other way of doing things. I just didn't know
Yeah.
it back then.
Right. Whether it's food, alcohol, sex, drugs, shopping, whatever it might be, screens, social media, we self-soothe in so many ways. But when you start to actually learn how to self-soothe in a healthy way, and that, which means like feeling your feelings, thinking better thoughts, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's not about, okay. So I just got to say, all of us listening here who've ever done every single diet under the sun, let's listen to Karen because we don't have to pick another diet. Let's do the mental diet. Like you said, let's work on our mindset. Let's work on our feelings. That is such wisdom. We all need to pay attention to that. I 1000% agree.
Thank you. Yeah. I think the biggest thing for most women that have struggled with trying all the diets and nothing ever working is we just don't, we're so disconnected. We live in our heads and don't feel.
Yeah.
And that's why we're looking for all those other things, because we don't want to feel. And it's funny because I tell my clients, when you start practicing and learning how to feel and not turn to something, it feels like you're going to die. Like I used
Mhm.
to remember that when I first started, I thought I was going to die because it felt like I was going to just, like, I just couldn't do this. And
Yes.
then I realized that feeling is just a vibration in my body from what I was thinking. And when I started, kept reminding myself of it, I'm not going to die. It's not going to kill me to feel this. I got just better and better at it. And don't get
Yeah.
me wrong, there's some days where it still pops up, right? I still
Mhm.
get some little jittery and anxiety a bit. And I'm just like, yeah, it's okay. No big deal. Like it's stopping fighting against the feelings is
Yeah.
a big, powerful thing to do.
Yeah, what we resist persists. So when you stop resisting and you start befriending your emotions, yeah, it does feel wildly uncomfortable at first. But yeah, you realize you're not going to die and you made it through that one time without binging or without drinking or without whatever. And the next time you remind yourself, I did it last time, I can do it again. And on we progress, one small moment of staying with ourselves at a time. I mean, oh my gosh, that is so powerful. So, like, where are you at today? What's up with you now? How do you feel? What's your, like, what's your life experience right now?
It is, I mean, it's wonderful. It's really wonderful. I've remarried to a wonderful guy. My relationships with my kids and my grandkids, it's so wonderful. But where I'm at is I have a business. Like I left nursing to work with nurses with weight loss, and I'm able to do this because of what I did for myself. Like I learned how to face my fears. Like I learned I can do whatever I want. It just has to be in my mind that this is what I want. I believe I can do it. It's like that's, I think, the biggest part of I can be happy. I like we were talking about before, it's I never was allowing myself to be happy before. Like it's
Mm,
you're not supposed to be happy. And my I love my mom to death, but she loves looking at the negative side all the time.
mhm.
So I had to really work on that. And that made a world of difference. But I can do anything I want now. It just has to be my choice. And
Yeah.
that's, I think, so empowering for me because growing up, I never thought I could do things. Like, yeah, I became a nurse, but even becoming the nurse, I thought I never was a good enough nurse.
Right.
But I even struggled in school when I was little writing, and I can't do that. Like I used to believe I'm not good at things. And now it's like, no, if I choose to do it, I can be good at it. It might not be
Right.
perfect, but that's okay.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you work with nurses and you're really walking the talk. Everything I hear and what you're saying is like you're walking the talk. You've done the work that you are helping your clients to do. I love that you work with nurses. What a I don't know, I'm just thinking of the last couple of years and what the nurses have been going through. And for the large part unacknowledged or unrecognized, and I can't even imagine this level of stress and feeling like how can I possibly be selfish and put myself first when I'm literally on the front lines of this pandemic. And if any nurses are listening, I'd really love for you to just say whatever you want to say to them.
That they are, well, first off, they're so focused on doing for everybody else. And I just want them to know it's okay to step back and do for yourself, like huge. And then also too, you don't have to be controlled by what's going on. Like we're so, us nurses, I remember I went through like SARS and everything. So I was working when that went on, and we just feel we have no control. We have no control of anything.
Right.
And what I teach is, yes, there are things you can't control, but there are things you can control. Like that's the focus. What can you control? Because that's what helps you feel so much better. When you feel that lack of control, it's not a fun feeling. And I think that's a huge part of why we emotionally eat. I have so many nurses, they tell me they come home from work and their brain is just
Mm,
going with all the things, the negative things they think they didn't do right or wrong. And I want them to know, like, you are doing your best. Like, you are doing your best. Like, stop talking so negatively to yourself. Like, I think if they only take away one thing, that one thing will make all the difference in the world.
mm. So good. I love that. Okay, I've got two last questions for you, Karen. One is if you could go back in time and say one thing to your little girl self, what would you want her to know?
That you are loved. I think
Mm,
I didn't feel that for until I did this work. I never felt loved. It's even though I know my parents were there, but I just never did,
yeah.
which is
Yeah.
the way I took on meaning of when I was growing up. So yeah,
Right. Yeah. You are loved. And now we can do that. We can love our little girl self. She's still in there. Right. And you are obviously doing that, which has made such a difference for you. And let's all tell our little girl selves that they are loved. And how are you being selfish these days? How are you putting yourself first?
oh, I'm going to Mexico at the end of
Oh,
with
hello.
a girlfriend. I'm going to Mexico for 12 days with a girlfriend.
Oh my God.
Just to go in. My husband couldn't get time off. I'm like, we're going. So I think
See ya,
that,
honey.
yeah, see that? And you know what? I never would have done that before. I
Mm,
never would have. It's like, that's not fair. Why should, it's not fair if he can't go. No, he can't. He's very supportive. The other one is it's just taking time for myself. I know I push myself a lot. I got to get things done. And the biggest thing that I've learned is I have to stop. Like, even if I stop for 5 minutes, do nothing for 5 minutes, sit there, because that's my recharge. Like,
right.
I have to stop doing so that actually can keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Love it. Amazing. So, how can we find you? How can women who are nurses work with you? Give us all the details.
Yeah, so you can find me. I have a website, KarenSchaible.com. I'm also on Instagram, and I have a podcast, Weight Loss for Nurses. So you can come take a listen on all that I do. And if actually the listeners, if they even take a listen to it, there's a lot of stuff I teach in there. If you implement that, you'll get started on losing weight as well. I do have a challenge, a 3-day boot camp coming up in a couple of weeks. And that then is sort of the kickoff to start my next group program. So got lots going on, and I'm excited. I'm excited to get a group of nurses together and get them loving themselves and losing that weight for the last time,
Mm,
because we can. Like,
mhm.
the percentage of people that keep that weight off. Like, I worked at the bariatric clinic for quite a few years too, and watched people go for that surgery, stomach surgery, and then gain that weight back again. So I know it can be done. Like this, if you do this work, you can lose it for that last time.
Mhm, mhm. I love it. And I love the group program because having a group of women who are, like-minded, they get you, they're going through similar things, just to have women around each other who can just support each other is so powerful too. So I love that. And we'll put all those links in the show notes. Karen, thank you so much. This was such a beautiful, powerful, authentic conversation. I love your story and I love what you're doing. The work you're doing in the world is so needed. So thank you for taking time to be here today.
Thank you for having me. And I hope your listeners, if they are struggling, I'll just reach out. Like,
Yeah.
reach out. That's the biggest, I guess that's my last message. You're not the only one going through it.
Yeah. Reach out. That's sometimes the hardest thing is to just sort of put your hand up and be like, hey, hi, but reach out. Karen's a lovely woman. She won't bite. Okay. Well, thanks so much, Karen. And thanks everyone for listening. And we will talk to you guys soon. Bye.